Hi, this is Tim O'Brien, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass.
My guest on Bluegrass Jam Along this week is Tim O'Brien, who I chatted to a while ago when we did the Dot Watson episodes, which was marvellous. And Tim's got a new record out, which we're going to talk about today. Tim, welcome back.
Thank you, Matt. Good to be with you again.
Congratulations, first off, on a great record. I've been listening to it for a couple of weeks now and absolutely loving it.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm real happy with the songs and excited to get out and play this music for people. I've already started, but yeah. It's always, you make something and you want to show it to everybody, and it's so exciting that way. You see how it goes. But it's been going well already.
Great. And I saw the first sort of couple of tracks drop via social media and stuff, and the first was Little Lamb, and the second was Bear. And I thought, here we go, it's a record full of songs about animals. And there's a fair few songs about animals on there, but it's not entirely that, is it?
Yeah.
And I believe Bear was sort of the first track that it all started coming together around.
I guess that's true. I think I wrote The Anchor before all that, but maybe it was 3 or 4 months before that. But yeah, I got into it right around the start of 2022. I was writing Bear, and it was almost done for a couple months, and then I finally came up. I was having one. It's funny. Like there's a line in there about I'd rather drink muddy water and sleep in a hollow log. I was trying to work something else in there, and it just was unsuccessful. And when I hit on that, I went, "Oh, perfect! I'd rather drink muddy water, and sleep in a hollow log." Is a perfect way to use the old traditional lines.
And it's a really interesting song because I sort of read a couple of things about it that you'd said, but before I'd read that, I'd listened to it and sort of had an entirely overlapping but different picture in my head of what it's about. And it's just I've listened to it since, and you can sort of read it in lots of ways. It's really interesting. But the sort of the main gist from what you were talking about that I read was about the bear is like an animal who feels like the world's left him behind slightly, and he feels slightly like the world's moved on and he hasn't, and still feels like he's should be relevant and should be listened to and should be there. And
right.
And I think that's a fascinating thing in the modern world, because as the world gets divided and divisive, like internationally, politically, personally, whatever, I think a big part of that is that people feel a bit left behind and people are angry.
No, it's really true. This is the whole success of Donald Trump was he appealed to people who felt left behind for the last 40 years in the United States. And I suppose the people that voted for Brexit maybe had some of the similar ideas. If you think about the Taliban, I feel for them. Their way of life is antiquated and going away, but they're holding on as long as they can, and they just don't want to give up. And I don't blame them in some ways. And Vladimir Putin's got his story that he tells, and if he believes it, I can understand he believes it. I don't look. Most of the world doesn't look at it that way, but there he is. And the bear, when all his trees are cut down, when he wakes up from his winter nap, is kind of pisses him off,
And I think that's sort of, in a way, a key to this record is that it is about, it feels to me, I put words into your mouth, but it feels like it is about connection and understanding other people's stories, because, essentially, everybody has a story. And like you say, if they believe it, that's the way the world is to them. And it's too easy to just dismiss people as wrong because they don't, and particularly in the social bubble world we live in, where you can just surround yourself with people who agree with you. I thought it was a really interesting, so much of the record feels like it lives in that space somewhere.
I think that's true. And the title track is kind of that way. It's like anybody that you see is your neighbor, and you can just treat them with basic respect. You don't have to go out of your way to, do something you wouldn't normally do. But if you want respect from them, you want to respect them as well, so that it can be reciprocal and, just basic manners, politeness, just empathy. I've got a sign in my, do I have it in here? I've got a sign in my yard. It's a political sign that I saw one day. It says Frank Empathy. It's like red, white, and blue. It's as if it was a name. And I wrote I looked it up online, and all it was there was a website that said frankempathy.com. So I wrote to him and I said, "What is this? I really like this sign." And it turns out it's an art project. And the sign started showing up around the 2016 elections, I think. Anyway, I really like that sign, and this kind of reminds me of that the idea that you're talking about. Just
Yeah,
that
and
we respect one another. Try to imagine where the place they're in.
yes, and I think it's so important because like the old saying goes, you can love anybody if you know their story, but we don't have time to know most people's stories. So we have a sort
No.
of shorthand for dismissing people if they believe a certain thing or dress a certain way or like a certain kind of music or whatever. We just like dismiss whole swathes of people because we haven't got time to understand them. And so those things that do seek to understand are kind of very moving in some ways.
Yeah. Well, in little villages, people know each other and they have to get along, or they're just going to be unhappy every day. They got to tolerate one another, and families are that way. You can't really not be a brother to your brother. It'd be really, it's tragic. So even if you don't agree with them, you kind of got to give them their head and let them exist in their way. And then maybe they'll let you exist too. So yeah, it's about that for sure.
And it's funny because listening to Bear, like all of that is in there. Like having heard you talk, sort of talk about what the song sort of came from. But I sort of heard it as almost an ecological message of this bear is a bear, like it's a bear, and he's not interested in what we think he is, but we expect him to behave in a certain way because we've decided he's a bear and that's his place in the world. And it's sort of the same thing, I guess.
It is the same thing. And the natural world is, those are our neighbors. Every plant and animal is a neighbor too. And they're of value, even if we don't even know it. Ola Bell Reed had the motto. She said, "We all need each other, whether we know it or not." And I really believe that. And she just said, you don't know what people are going through, but you need to help them if you can, because they probably will help you later on. And like with the natural world, you're absolutely right. We disregard it, and it's brought us this far. We need to protect it.
Yeah, and it's that thing of just kind of just presuming that because we've decided this is what the bear's place in the world is, that he's going to have read the same books we've had and come to the same conclusion. And from his point of view, we're the ones in the way and encroaching on his habitat and all of that. And it just found it really deep and really sort of like, every time I go back to it, there's another sort of layer of something in there. And I love songs like that.
I like the song because of that, because it does go in a different direction and also doesn't specify. It lets your mind wander. I almost didn't want to say all that stuff in the promotional materials, to let people figure it out. A lot of people are saying this is, written from the novel The Bear Goes Home, and that's only one aspect of it. But I was reading about dancing bears and how they taught them. They heat the floor, they heat tiles on the floor, and play music, and that's their signal that the floor is going to get hot, and then they remember that. And it's very cruel. I didn't get that in the song. That's where the muddy water and hollow log came in. It replaced all that. I couldn't explain it. So it kind of goes away, but it's there for it, really, without all that in there. Anyway, it's just the process of writing. And putting a bear, making the character a bear, takes it out of it. It sneaks up on you because it could be about any kind of person who thinks like this bear.
Well, I was going to ask you about this later, but there's a thing from I read from when He Walked On came out, and this is a quote from something you said at the time. When you sing something, it kind of sneaks in that music is a powerful medium. It's a language that's mysterious on its own. It tugs on the emotions. It grabs people's attention in a certain way and prepares them to hear things. And music kind of draws people together. And I think that's really true. Like, instead of telling somebody something, you just sort of show it to them and let them work it out.
Yeah, if you can show it, and that's the game. That's the aim I try with the songs is instead of saying this is how I feel, or this is the way you should be, or we should be. It just sort of show the problem, show the story, tell the story, and let people make their own conclusions for sure. But yeah, it's just I'm lucky every once in a while when stuff works out that way. I mean, but like I say, I think I'm getting better at aiming at the target and getting closer to the bullseye now and again. I just kind of keep trying.
We'll be right back with you just after this. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins. If you're attending the NAMM show in January, stop by the Collings booth to say hello to the team, get hands-on with their selection of customised acoustics and electrics, and check out some exciting new prototypes they're working on for 2024. They'll also have a few of their world-class artists on hand demoing various instruments. And if you can't attend, don't forget to follow their Instagram and Facebook accounts throughout the show for photos, videos, and the latest news. Collings guitars are hand-built from the Sound Up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If one of your 2024 resolutions is to improve as a musician, Peghead Nation is the place to go. They have 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music. Courses cover bluegrass, old-time, Irish music and swing, plus lessons dedicated to improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 a month, and you can add more for $10. Try any course free for a month with the promo code JAMALONG. Make 2024 a year of more music at pegheadnation.com. I think that's sort of like that, sort of ties in with the idea of some of the, there's a song on the last record called He Walked On, which is just sort of about keeping going and, and that thing of journeys and process, and you get to places on the way and stuff happens, but it's I've been thinking about this a lot this week, actually, just the idea that maybe the art is actually the process and the stuff that comes out the other end is just the byproduct, because it's that turning up every day,
Yeah, no, the process is really, at least as much as anything else. And then when you're done with it, like it's up to everyone else. That's their time to reflect on it. And any kind of, if somebody says, I took this from the song, I go, great. I might have not even thought of that. And it makes me happy, as opposed to, no, it's not about that. So I don't need to own it once it's out. I own it, and yet it's really for everyone else to use.
I sort of the presumption that any of us really know what we mean at any given time anyway. I can say stuff all the time and think this is what I believe, but you sort of go back and then think about it a bit more and go, maybe I don't know, I'm not sure.
The writing is a way of kind of organizing your thoughts too. And sometimes you don't realize what you want to express until you've worked on the song. Because sometimes you'll stop and say, gee, that's not the right way to approach this. It's not fair, or it's not clear. You really learn kind of what you're about. And it's when you start, you don't really know what you're about. And you do learn. But I was just going to say that the music and the lyric, they're kind of part of a structure, and they kind of lean on each other. They don't need as much strength when they bond. There's some kind of lightweight kind of, if you keep a little space in it, it's kind of really strong, but there's a lot of room for other stuff to fall in there. And, but you don't have to necessarily be so specific, and so it doesn't really need much. It's just a little suggestion. And the sort of musical thing is like, I don't know, that's like trees growing and, the sun shining, or, it's like natural stuff. It's like, it's mysterious and not, there's no real definition about it. You hear it and you know it, but it's kind of, it's an invitation into the thought world, internal world or something. It's, it really helps the lyrics. And the lyrics help the music. The music might not be very good either sometimes, but just a little bit of lyric will make it strong.
Yeah,
It's,
it's very true. Actually, I sort of hadn't thought about it in those terms, but just like it constantly amazes me how many tunes I hear in a major key with three or four chords and the same notes, and but people are still writing tunes that are entirely memorable, and often it's the words that make the tune memorable in a weird way,
yes,
or the tune that
yeah,
makes the words memorable. Or
yeah. I the last month or so, so I'm doing a thing that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Is the songwriter Tom Paxton? They're making a bluegrass. Tom Paxton's songs done with bluegrass arrangements, and Tom and I always wanted to write together, so we've written 3 songs and we recorded one of them. And I haven't asked him this because once we do it by Zoom, and once we start, it's like all business, and within an hour we have most of a song, if not all of it. And he's such a master and so experienced at it. And I kind of wonder why he wants to do all that, but it's what he does, and I think he really believes in the communication, the possibilities of it, even though he may not be alive when he hears this stuff, when it comes out, rather. He may hear it after he's dead. I don't know, but you know what I mean. He just is driven to create, and it excites him to get something good. And maybe that's, as you get older, that's more important than almost anything, is that you leave something behind. I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out just because I think I have to ask him his intention of, what it is that makes him write songs that way. He's a brilliant guy at writing topical songs if you have a political thing or something. But we wrote a real straight up, kind of almost like a real gospel song called "You Took Me In," and it's great. It's great to see him excited, and it makes me excited that he likes the song. So we got something good.
that's cool.
Trust the
So I was
guy.
going to, well, I was sort of leads in a little bit to something I was going to chat to you about because it feels like this record, "Cup of Sugar," and the last record, "He Walked On," they sort of feel quite connected to me as I listen to them together, and it feels like, and obviously, "He Walked On" was, sort of centered around like social justice, I guess is the phrase, but a lot of the songs had those themes and the time the record was written and released, and it
Yeah,
feels like "Cup of Sugar" is very much like a response to that record almost. It feels like it's slightly more hopeful and slightly more, it's been through the mill of those songs and kind of got its head up a
yeah.
little bit.
I think that's right. I think there's a relief in getting through the pandemic, but also those times are so heavy. They're still heavy, but we need a little break from it. We need, and I think that that "Cup of Sugar" is a good title because it's here's all this bitterness that we have. Here's a little something to temper it with. There's still a little bit of social justice in here, but it's whimsical, I hope. And yeah, the saddest song really is the one that Jan and I wrote, called "He Can't" or "She Can't, He Won't," and the rest of the stuff is mostly kind of whimsical. I mean, the bear is pissed off, but most of the songs are pretty whimsical.
It's interesting. There's some pretty sort of like heavy themes, but held quite lightly and not
Yeah,
sort of, they're not wielded like a club. They're
well, that's good news.
they leave room for you to sort of think it. And I'd love that kind of songwriting. And I think it often happens with a sort of song that has a story from somebody else's perspective in it. Steve Earle does
Yeah,
those so
yeah,
well. But just sort of goes, here's somebody. It's not my story. Here's a story,
yeah,
and just go and live over there for 5 minutes and see how it makes you feel, and then come back again.
yeah, yeah. The story about the dog, this dog that inherited all this money, that was really a crack up to me. And but it was like so obvious that there was a song there. especially when I read that the dog's name was Lulu, and I went, oh, there's Ralph Stanley has Shout Lulu, or Lulu Shout, or whatever he calls it. It's like a banjo tune that he learned from his mother. Now I don't know what that song's about really, but a few of the lyrics made it into there. How many nickels does it take to make little Lulu's body shake? That's right from Ralph Stanley singing it. And but it's like the context around here in Nashville is really tangible because of the statue that was along the interstate of this white supremacist Civil War guy. And right in my neighborhood is the guy who made the sculpture. He was this lawyer, white supremacist lawyer that defended the assassin of Martin Luther King. And when he died, I found out he lived in my neighborhood. And I asked my barber, he said, oh, that guy used to come in here all the time and get his haircut. Nice guy. So it's like, I just like the fact that it's just right in front of me. And I can relate to where the guy lived and where he'd walked. And then his friend who gave him land to put up the statue. And then the dog who knows nothing about it really, except that give me a treat. And, now I need to pee. I just think it's, that's a story. It's just like too funny to not be told.
And there's a much more there's a very kind of sort of worthy and serious version of that song you could have written instead. This idea and that word whimsical. It's sort of I think that lightness allows the depth, if that makes sense. It allows that to come through. Yeah,
I hope so. Playing. It's a real cottage industry around here. Jan and I working in the office and doing the release ourselves, and we contract out publicity and radio promotion and that kind of stuff. But we're kind of doing most of the stuff here and making original art for the thing. For the last record and this record was kind of part of that too. It just seemed easier. It seemed more honest and kind of, we're kind of, we're not retiring, but we're slowing down. And it's kind of makes sense to kind of shrink it a little bit. And in some ways it's made it better, so more personal. Danny Barnes is one of my good buddies and a great musician and songwriter. And I showed him what I was painting for he walked on. He said, oh, that is so good. That's so much better than anything anyone else could do. And it's just, that's what he does. He makes his own art. But it's like just getting that endorsement really gave me the faith that it maybe would work. And I think it does feel good to do that. I'm not that good at it. And I worked hard and I don't get into it until I have a project to do. So it's kind of funny. I should be practicing every day like I used to practice the mandolin and the guitar, but it is a little bit more personal.
Yeah, and it becomes, if you practice every day, it becomes a different thing. You could spend 364 days a year making a great album cover and then record a load of tunes really quickly. It wouldn't be the same thing. Right. It's interesting that sort of that talking about doing all at home like a cottage industry. There's something very similar over here with Kate Rusby in the way that they set up their family record label, and her parents are involved and her sisters involved and her brothers involved, and Kate Rusby is a family industry, and there's something just lovely about that. Something very down to earth, and particularly at the time where her career started and the world was becoming more digital, and that felt like it was really old fashioned. It feels
they were really renegade, the Rusby family, and they didn't even realize how smart they were until it was all really working beautifully. And I'm sure it's still going that way. I haven't seen Kate in a long time, but that's a real good example of that.
Just how much control over what she puts out she's able to exercise.
Yes.
Yeah.
She's well, they're also kind of going. I remember when they had. I don't know if you remember the group, The Equation. She was in that briefly, but she left. She and Catherine Roberts and the two of the Lakeman brothers. Or maybe it was all three of the Lakeman brothers: Seth, Sean, and Sam. Maybe the five of them. But she quit the group, and they had put out the Kate and Catherine record. And, they got this cover with the two beautiful young women. with bare shoulders, and that's you just see their skin from here up, and you go, "Wow, what's this?" And then you listen to it, and it's like really old style folk music, and it's like it's really brilliant, brilliant hook. They lure you in, and then you go, "Oh yeah, this is really pure and beautiful." And Kate's case, she just kept doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's I think sort of listening to these songs on this record, and there's something that feels very and I guess this is something that I've felt through your music for years, but there's something very immediate about it in that sense of, we were just talking about Kane presenting her stuff direct herself without it going through a load of filters. And I've always sort of felt that about your delivery, both vocally and instrumentally, that it's just like kind of, I mean, unadorned is maybe not the right word for it, but and we talked about this with the Doc Watson stuff a while ago, but just it's a very direct, very immediate expression of something that doesn't try to do anything other than communicate.
Yeah, I think that
it's very appealing.
That's the real aim with the music and with a show, is that we get to communicate with one another, the audience to the performer and back. It gives people a chance to stop the chaos or the noise in their life and sit down and let music intervene for a minute. And there's really not much that you need to do after that. You just get everybody together and they trust each other, and then you just can see what happens. And a performer has to be prepared to have a few options in case things are going to go sideways. But basically, everybody's on your side when you start, and you just try to be friends. So I don't know. It's I'm sure it's it seems very simple to me. I would think almost anybody would try to be direct, but some people are putting on a show, more of a show. They play a part. They have a sort of invented personality, maybe, and that can work for a while. But I've never. Well, I did have a personality with Red Knuckles for sure, and just turned into a different person. But that person was really me too, and I don't know. It's hard to explain, but yeah, when I quit playing with Hot Rise, I decided I didn't want to be two different people anymore, and I didn't want to have to bring different clothes that I wouldn't wear, normally the regular part of the day. That kind of thing. I tried to make my life just sort of, seamless and just, not seamless, but simpler. And maybe that's an outgrowth. What you're talking about is an outgrowth of that desire, that approach.
And that's interesting. Did the music change in any way after that, in terms of the way you wrote? Did that sort of feel like it reconciled anything? Or?
It did change, I suppose, in that there was no structure on it necessarily. It was all just about what I felt like I could pull off. And I was always trying to write better songs. Coming to Nashville in the late years of Hot Rise and co-writing with people and hearing what other people are doing, it gets you up on your game. You see what the competition is. And so the other thing is, I was not writing for a bluegrass band, and bluegrass, even within bluegrass, Hot Rise had a certain thing that we wanted to do, that we were good at, and there were certain other things that we couldn't do, and we were smart not to try it. And the stuff that Bela Fleck does, that we were never going to play that way. And but even so, just being in bluegrass, that there is a little bit more borders and strictures and rules and things. So it changed a little bit that way.
And it's interesting because I've seen you play lots of times, I guess, over the years in lots of different settings, but it always feels like the same thing. And so I've seen you, I think the first time I saw you was at Cambridge Folk Festival in 1990, 5, I think.
Wow. Yeah, could be right.
And that was with the O Boys. I saw the Crossing tour where you had a whole bunch of people with you. I've seen you play on your own. I've seen you sort of do songs with the Transatlantic Sessions tour, and so they're all very, very different sort of musical settings. But it's all feels like Tim O'Brien.
Well, that's good. That's a great compliment. You know that. You know what? I don't know if I said this in our last interview, but Thelonious Monk, he has rules for musicians, and one of them is the genius is the one who sounds the most like himself. I thought that was wonderful. I've got it. I'll let that go. Yeah, you know, it's just about getting to, you know, who you are and what you can do, what you can't do, and, you know, expressing yourself cleanly. I find that older musicians get more concise, and maybe the songwriters do too. I don't know. David Grisman, if you listen to his music, the early quintet, you know, recordings, and then you listen to more recent ones, he still plays the same way, and you can still tell it's David Grisman, but he's trimmed away a lot of unnecessary stuff. It's because he's older, it's harder to do all that stuff, but also he knows he doesn't need it. You know, you kind of get down to the real essence of things, and then it's much easier to just go at it. You know, you can get the job done with fewer swings of the hammer.
Yeah, and sort of talking about those like variety musical settings that I've seen you in. They're just listening to this record as well. There's such a sort of breadth of instrumentation on it, and some of it is, you know, there's Let the Horses Run, which is pretty much straight up bluegrass. But there's stuff with Hammond organ, there's stuff with pedal steel, there's some great fiddle playing on the record. There's you know, each track is its own little sort of sonic world in a way. And I love that about it. It sort of takes you on a little journey.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I like that. I mean, one of my troubles, or, you know, a downside to that eclecticism, you know, is people don't, they feel it's jarring, but I try to make it somehow flow. I hope it's not too jarring. I think I'm better at it than I used to be. So I don't know, but also the audience is kind of used to it now. The ones that have been following, they're kind of used to this, and they like the same kind. I mean, most of the people that I know like country music. They like bluegrass. You know, they like blues. They like, you know, the real things, the real roots forms, and it's not as much of a problem. And, you know, I hear that stuff, and I hear jazz and Bill Monroe, and I hear rock and roll and Bill Monroe, and, you know, all that. So it's just a matter of accentuating this and that. And the keyboard thing is, I love it. I love playing with that guy, Mike Rojas. He's just fantastic, just really sympathetic. He's so good that you don't have to give him any direction. He just, and all the players are that way. They just know what you're after, and that's the thing. If you know what you're doing, and you can put it together. I always try to get the songs to where I can play them in pretty good rhythmic, you know, the same tempo. Keep the tempo, and get the right key, and to where I really know the lyrics. Whereas it's kind of like muscle memory. You get enough of that so that you're presenting something that everybody can fold in around. Whereas if you're learning it as you go, there's less for them to understand. So
yeah,
that's the pre-production, getting comfortable with the songs.
It's interesting talking about that, about instrumentation, and you sort of talked earlier about stopping playing with Hot Rise and sort of being freed from that the rules of writing for that ensemble, and I guess it overlaps a bit with what we've been talking about. And the idea of genre in music is something that is there to, it doesn't really help anybody listen to the music, or it doesn't really help the music. It's just there to, you know, make things convenient. And it's, people do get very divided about music, about, you know, this is good music, that is bad music, this is right, this is that. And it's back to what we were talking about at the beginning, really, with all that, you know, politics is the same. If somebody votes a certain way, I feel entirely justified in dismissing everything they think, even though probably 90% of what they think is the same as what I think, and 99% of their DNA is the same as my DNA, and
Yeah.
like probably 85% of our DNA is the same as the bear's DNA, and we look for
Yeah.
differences rather than similarities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's really true. I I'm trying to battle against that. Is all.
Well,
I think it's really important to notice your differences, but also the similarities. That's all. It's just trying to be round. It's like holistic.
I think that's found like so moving about this record, because although there is quite a bit of whimsy to it, it also most of the songs feel like they're about connection, even if it's when people aren't connecting, like She Can't, He Won't. Even when there's a
Mhm.
lack of connection,
Yeah.
there's always that desire for things to be okay, and a little bit of hope, and a little bit of like Little Lamb, just this sort of standing on your toes when spring comes along, and just breathing in and feeling the world come alive again. And
Yeah.
it feels like a very up record. And this might just be me, I might be a bit odd, but I tend to get much more moved by art that has hope in it than art that is. I love a sad song, don't get me wrong, but I tend to get more moved by something that
Yeah.
gives me hope.
Well, good. Good. That's. I'm glad. I'm glad it worked for you. you know, uh, I'm trying to entertain a little bit and express myself, but like I say, whatever anybody else gets out of it is great, and I just hope that it works. And it's I'm glad you hear it that way.
No, it's really cool, and it feels, I was saying before, that it's a bit of a companion piece to He Walked On, which was a slightly different record. But there's this song He Walked On, which is sort of just about how bad things are, just keeping going, and you put one foot in front of the other, and you keep. And as I listened to it, it reminded me very much of Walk Beside Me from Real Time, the record you did with Daryl Scott, about putting one foot in front of the other. Like there's
You don't know where you're going, but you'll get there, and it's the same
yeah.
feeling that the guy that's a grave digger, in that one song, pays a lot better too. He's been through enough of it to realize, hey, whatever happens, we're still alive. I woke up today. Actually, Daryl and I we were playing at a festival, and we were going to the airport on Sunday morning, and there was this guy frying oysters in this little restaurant there in the airport. And I asked him how he's doing. How am I doing? I'm doing great. I woke up today. That's the attitude. Whatever else happens, we're alive and we're taking nourishment. I like
Yeah,
that.
and after a few years of some of that feeling like it was slightly more in question,
Mm-hmm.
just coming out. I mean, there is that sort of springtime reawakening thing in the air at the moment, where things were dark and the world felt small for a while, and all of a sudden
Yeah,
the world
it
feels
is
big again.
kind of a little bit of a springtime from the pandemic in it right now. It's like the spring, like 2021, they tried to reopen, and it was kind of iffy. 2022, same. And this year, it seems like it really is back opened. And so maybe it is kind of the spring of the pandemic, winter, finally.
Did you manage to tour much for He Walked On? Did you manage to get out and play for that record?
Yeah, we did. But the year that it came out was iffy. So we're kind of touring, 9 months and a year after the fact. And that's tough with the press and everybody. They're not going to write about it again. So, but it worked out. But it was a lot slower.
And presumably, you said at the beginning you've got stuff lined up for this record already. Got a tour planned for that.
Yeah, I've got quite busy summer, and it'll be great. A lot of shows with the band, and we're actually getting to Prague and to La Roche Festival this summer in August, which will be great. Never been to Prague, so got some new things on the calendar, which are exciting.
Cool. Any chance we're going to get you back over here in the UK at some time soon?
Jan and I are coming in January, and we have like 8 shows or something leading up to Celtic Connections.
Oh, great.
I'm not sure what we'll do there, but I think we're going to be playing there. Yeah.
Excellent. It's
I wish
always a
I'd
good
get
time over here.
I wish I'd gotten there sooner. It's kind of hard to tour service the entire world. I mean, but we'll get there. But I guess the orders from the distributor in advance are pretty strong. So obviously that's good. And so maybe that'll help when we finally come and play. People will remember the record.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with it. I hope so. It's a great record. I'm enjoying it immensely.
Thank you very much.
It's great to talk to you again, Tim. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for bearing with me. Take care of yourself.
Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.